All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving into the Roman arena, Gladiator II style. We've got two juicy reviews to dissect. And let me tell you, it's like these critics watched two totally different films.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Like, same basic setup, 16 years after the original, new characters, but same Roman power struggles,
Yeah.
Familiar faces too, Lucilla, Gracchus. But their opinions, totally different.
Yeah, it's like they were looking through those colored togas or something. One is all about the spectacle, like diving headfirst into the immersive world, fast-paced action, those crazy gladiator battles. And they even say, like, historical accuracy, not really the priority here.
Right, like, let's be real, who goes to a gladiator movie for a history lesson?
Huh? Exactly.
We're here for the drama, the spectacle, the thrill of it all, right?
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of thrills, this review is all about Denzel Washington.
Oh, yeah, Denzel.
They practically throw rose petals at his feet, calling his performance as the villain, Macrenus, power incarnate.
I mean, it's Denzel, right? You just know he's going to bring the intensity to it.
Right. He always delivers.
What I think is interesting, though, is all this focus on spectacle and Denzel being a huge star makes me wonder if they're trying to appeal to a younger audience, the ones raised on all those CGI blockbusters.
That's a good point. Kind of risky, though, right? Could alienate the OG fans who loved the first one for, like, the more grounded story and characters.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of potentially alienated fans, the other review basically throws shade at everything the first one loved.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Call the plot like a copycat, no character development, and way too much CGI.
Ouch.
Yeah, they see it as a pale imitation, all flash and no substance.
So one review is like, bring on the bombast. And the other's like, where's the depth, man? Talk about a clash of the titans, huh?
For real. And speaking of titans, got to talk about our new gladiator, Lucius, played by Paul Mescal. Big shoes to fill after Russell Crowe, right?
Right. So did he measure up?
Our views are, surprise, surprise, divided again. The positive one admits, yeah, Mescal doesn't have that same swagger as Crowe, but they highlight his charisma, his vulnerability, say it actually works for the character since he's kind of thrown into this whole gladiator world.
So different vibe, but still compelling.
That's what they're saying. But the negative review, nope, not buying it. They find Mescal, promising, but ultimately can't carry the film like Crowe did.
Interesting. So we got conflicting views on the plot, the spectacle, the new lead.
Yeah, but buckle up, because here's where it gets juicy family secrets.
Lay it on me.
The negative review drops a bomb. Lucius is Maximus's son.
Whoa, wait, what?
Yeah, they're shocked, too. Even question why this wasn't even hinted at in the original film.
Right, like where did that come from?
They even argue it kind of cheapens Maximus's death, Like, in the original, it was this heroic sacrifice, right? But now, suddenly he has a son, especially one who's, the main character in the sequel.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Kind of makes you wonder, if Maximus knew, would he have fought harder to survive? Wouldn't the stakes have been even higher?
Wow, that's deep. So is this family revelation a clever twist or just a way to try and connect to the original? Sounds like something you got to see to decide, huh?
Definitely. And speaking of things you got to see to decide, let's talk about the CGI. Both reviews touch on this, but again, with very different opinions.
All right, let's hear it.
Positive review praises the more advanced digital effects, saying they create a believable world, even if some stuff, like sharks in the Colosseum, kind of pushes it,
Wait, hold on, sharks. In the Colosseum? Isn't that a bit much? Even for Ridley Scott?
You'd think, right. But this review defends it, saying the film embraces its over-the-topness. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but just roll with it.
Okay, I can kind of see that.
But the other review, hard pass. They slam the CGI, saying it's all spectacle, no substance.
So one loves the CGI, the other hates it. Classic.
Right, and they compare it to the original, which used CGI sparingly, relied more on practical effects for that gritty realism.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes too much CGI can take you right out of the movie.
It's like, oh, look, a convenient, perfectly rendered CGI rhino,
Exactly. So one sees the CGI as, enhancing the spectacle. The other sees it as a crutch, hiding a weak story.
Exactly. And that difference even spills over into how entertaining they found the film.
Oh, how so?
Positive review says the director's passion is contagious, makes for a fun, popcorn-munching experience. But the other one, not so much.
Yeah, I was going to say they didn't seem too thrilled.
They say it's entertaining in that, so bad it's good way, but ultimately a missed opportunity. Couldn't capture the magic of the original.
Okay, so we've got one saying, grab your popcorn, enjoy the ride, and the other saying, lower your expectations, folks. Quite the range.
It is, and it really shows how much personal taste matters, right?
Yeah.
What you bring to the film affects how you experience it.
Absolutely. So, dear listener, where do you stand on all this? Team shark jumping spectacle or team character-driven substance? Sounds like you got to see Gladiator II to decide for yourself.
Yeah, sometimes the only way to judge a film is to see it firsthand. But even before you do, these contrasting viewpoints, worth thinking about. They offer insights into the film, how they made it, and what audiences even expect these days. You know, it's really interesting how these reviews show how hard it is to make a sequel to a movie everyone loved. Like, you got to capture what made the original great, but also do your own thing, you know?
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope. Lean too much on the original, you're just copying. But go too far, you might lose the fans.
And it seems like Gladiator II is right on that tightrope. Speaking of pushing boundaries, the CGI is where things get really divisive.
Oh yeah, the CGI. One review loves it, says it creates this believable world, but even they admit some stuff like the sharks in the Colosseum is kind of over the top.
Right, like, we know it's a lot, but just go with it.
Haha, yeah. But the other view? Absolutely not. They say the CGI is distracting, takes away from the story.
Yeah, they're definitely in the less is more camp when it comes to effects. And they make a good point. The original Gladiator, it used CGI carefully, relied more on practical stuff to feel real.
Right, that grounded look was a big part of why people loved it.
Totally. And sometimes too much CGI just takes you out of the movie.
Yeah, it's like, oh look, a perfectly rendered CGI rhino. How convenient.
Exactly. It can feel fake, calculated. This review says Gladiator II falls into that trap, choosing the spectacle over substance. They even call out the CGI animals specifically, saying they look more like video game characters than real creatures.
I gotta admit, a gladiator riding a CGI rhino does sound more Jumanji than Gladiator.
Right. But this whole CGI debate, it makes you think about a bigger question. Are we, like, so used to CGI now that we don't appreciate those more nuanced, character-driven stories anymore?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Are we sacrificing substance for spectacle? I mean, I love a good visual feast as much as anyone, but I also want stories that make me feel something, connect with the characters.
Absolutely. And that's what's so interesting about these two reviews. They're like a reflection of this bigger conversation about CGI and movies in general.
Okay, so aside from the CGI battle royale, what else stood out to you? Any key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, one thing that caught my eye was how they talk about Rome itself. One review describes it as even more decadent than in the original, like morally bankrupt, filled with political scheming, betrayal, this constant sense of unease.
Ooh, intrigue and backstabbing. I'm in.
Right. They even highlight the twin emperors, Geta and Caracalla, saying they're persuasively venal. I love that phrase, persuasively venal. It perfectly captures that mix of charm and corruption.
It's giving Game of Thrones, but in ancient Rome, all those power struggles, alliances, betrayals. Who needs dragons when you've got Roman senators?
Exactly. But the other review, interestingly, focuses more on what's missing. They say we're told about the emperor's madness and cruelty, but we don't really see it.
That's a good point. It's one thing to say a character is cruel, but it's another to actually make us feel it, you know?
Yeah. Right. It's the difference between telling and showing. If we don't see the consequences, their villainy feels less real, less scary.
So one review is all about this decadent Rome full of intrigue,
Yeah.
and the other says the movie doesn't fully deliver on that potential. Quite a difference.
Yeah, and it shows how subjective film criticism is. One person's amazing world is another person's missed opportunity.
And this actually ties back to something we talked about earlier. Remember how one review questioned if the Lucius Maximus father-son thing kind of cheapens the original?
Oh yeah, definitely. And this same review also criticizes the lack of character development, especially for Lucius. They say he's just not as compelling as Maximus, so his connection to the original feels forced, kind of tacked on.
It's like they're saying, okay, he's Maximus's son, but who is he? What does he want? What does he stand for?
Exactly. Without that depth, the whole family connection feels more like a plot device than a genuine emotional thing. And it ties into this bigger criticism about the film relying too much on nostalgia. Like, it's trying to cash in on our love for the original without actually offering anything new or substantial. They even call it fan service masquerading as storytelling.
Ouch. That's harsh, but it makes you think, right? Are sequels always going to be stuck in the shadow of the original? Or can they break free and become something truly unique?
It's a tough question. Some sequels find that balance, respecting the original, but also finding their own voice. Others, not so much.
Yeah. And it sounds like Gladiator II might be one of those. at least according to this review. But of course, it's all subjective. You might see it and feel completely differently.
That's the beauty of art, right? It's open to interpretation.
And that's why we do these deep dives, to give you different perspectives, break down the filmmaking choices, and ultimately encourage you to form your own opinions.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's your experience that matters. You get to decide what kind of movie you want to see.
Well said. And speaking of forming opinions, we haven't even touched on the supporting cast. One review mentions Connie Nielsen, who plays Lucilla again, saying she brings this haunted gravitas to the film.
Oh, yeah. They describe her as a woman dealing with the consequences of her choices, which adds this whole other layer to the story.
It sounds like she's carrying the weight of the empire on her shoulders. I always find characters who are haunted by their past so much more interesting, more relatable.
Me too. But the other review, while they acknowledge Nielsen's performance, they say even she can't save the movie from its lack of character development. They say even the characters we know from the first movie feel kind of flat, like shadows of their former selves.
It sounds like they miss that complexity, that nuance that we saw in the original.
Totally. They missed those quiet moments, the small details that showed us what the characters were really feeling.
So one review loves the performances, especially Connie Nielsen's, for adding some emotional depth. The other one finds the characters, even the familiar ones, kind of lacking.
It seems like we're seeing a pattern here, right? One review loves the spectacle, the surface level thrills. The other one wants something deeper, more character-driven.
You know, it makes me wonder if this is part of a bigger trend in Hollywood. Are we moving away from stories about characters and more towards big-budget spectacle? Is that what audiences want, or is it just what studios think audiences want?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's not one we can answer definitively, but we can keep having these conversations, analyzing the movies that are being made, and encouraging people to think critically about the stories they're consuming.
Because in the end, it's up to us, the audience, to decide what kind of movies we want to see. We have the power to choose with our wallets, our streaming subscriptions, our voices.
And hopefully, by doing these deep dives, we can help people become more discerning, more thoughtful viewers.
So we've got two reviews, total opposites, CGI controversy, family secrets, and like a whole debate about what even makes a good movie these days. What does all this mean for you, dear listener? Ready to step into that Gladiator II arena?
Well, it sounds like the big question is, what are you looking for in this movie? Are you hoping for that same feel as the original, that gritty realism, the emotional stuff? Or are you ready for a big, over-the-top spectacle, CGI mayhem, Denzel just chewing the scenery?
Yeah, because it seems like, based on these reviews, you're going to get one or the other. Maybe a bit of both, but definitely lean in one way or the other. Like each review highlights a different way of thinking about how this movie was made.
You know what really gets me thinking is that idea one review brought up about the CGI, how maybe it shows a lack of trust in the audience, like, we got to keep hitting you with these crazy effects or you'll get bored.
Which, let's be real, kind of is how we've been trained as moviegoers, right? Look at all the superhero movies, explosions, CGI characters. It's practically a requirement now.
Yeah, that's true. But it doesn't mean we should just accept it, right?
Yeah.
The other review makes a good point. The first Gladiator, it was epic, but it felt grounded. They weren't afraid to slow down, let the story breathe, let you feel the characters' emotions.
And it sounds like that's what some people want from this sequel. That same emotional depth, the historical feel, even if it's dramatized.
It makes you wonder, can a movie that's so CGI heavy also have that kind of emotional impact? Or are those two things just like fundamentally opposed?
Yeah, that's a good question to consider, dear listener. Might be the key to figuring out if Gladiator 10 is for you.
If you're the kind of person who loves those quieter moments, the character stuff that makes you feel something real, well, you might be disappointed. But if you're going in expecting a big, loud, action-packed ride, you might just have a blast.
Exactly. It's all about expectations, and that's why we do these deep dives, right? To give you the info you need to make your own choices about what you watch.
Because at the end of the day, it's your choice, your experience.
All right, dear listener. The arena's waiting. Will you be cheering for the spectacle or demanding more substance? Go see Gladiator II and then come back and tell us what you think. We're always up for a good discussion.
That's what it's all about, right? Talking about movies, how they affect us, how they make us see the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Until next time, happy viewing, everyone.